Captain Sarah stood at the observation deck of the UES Harmony, watching the swirling nebula colors paint the darkness of space in shades of purple and gold. 3 years ago, this same view had filled her with wonder. Now it only reminded her of how far humanity had traveled from home and how much farther they still had to go. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Galactic Council," Lieutenant reported from the bridge communications station. His voice carried the same weary tone that had become common among the crew over the past 18 months. Sarah sighed and made her way back to the captain's chair. The Harmony was humanity's flagship, designed not for war but for exploration and diplomacy. Its sleek hull gleamed white against the star field, a symbol of Earth's peaceful intentions when they first made contact with galactic civilization. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the familiar face of Counselor, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid with large black eyes and an expression that somehow managed to convey both authority and condescension. Behind him, the grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched into the distance, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. "Captain," began, his translator rendering his words in perfect English. "The Council has reviewed humanity's latest proposal for membership. Once again, we must respectfully decline." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt the familiar sting of rejection. This was the 15th time in 3 years that humanity had been membership in the galactic community. Each rejection came with new requirements, new tests, new hoops to jump through. "May I ask what concerns the Council has this time, Counselor?" His large eyes seemed to shimmer with what might have been amusement. "Your species remains too aggressive, too violent. The Council cannot risk admitting a race that solves problems through force rather than negotiation. With respect, Counselor, humanity has been at peace for over 2 centuries. We've had no major conflicts since the Unity Wars of 2157. "Yes, but violence remains in your nature," another voice interjected. The camera panned to show Counselor, and being with multiple arms and a chittering voice. "Your history shows countless wars, genocides, and acts of brutality. How can we trust that this peace is anything more than a temporary pause?" Sarah had heard these arguments countless times. It seemed that no matter what humanity accomplished, no matter how many peaceful gestures they made, the galaxy's older species saw them only as warlike savages barely restrained by civilization. "The Council has decided," continued, "that humanity must undergo another period of observation. Perhaps in another 50 years you may reapply." 50 years. Sarah bit back her immediate response. For the Council members with their measured in centuries, or 50 years was nothing. For humanity, it was 2 generations. It was children born and grown old without ever seeing their species accepted among the stars. "Counselor," Sarah said carefully, "surely there must be some way to demonstrate our peaceful intentions more definitively. A test, perhaps, a mission." The 2 aliens exchanged what might have been glances. "There is one possibility," said slowly. "The Outer Rim territories have been experiencing problems with pirates and raiders. These are criminals, outcasts from various species who prey on legitimate commerce. If humanity were to pacify these regions using only peaceful methods, it might demonstrate your commitment to nonviolence." Sarah's tactical mind immediately began analyzing the proposal. The Outer Rim was notorious for being lawless and dangerous. Merchant ships regularly disappeared, and even Council peacekeeping forces avoided the region. To clear it out using only peaceful methods seemed impossible. What exactly would constitute peaceful methods in the Council's view? "Negotiation, diplomacy, economic incentives," chittered. "No weapons, no military force, pure peaceful resolution of conflict." It was a trap, Sarah realized. The Council was offering humanity an impossible task, knowing they would either fail or be forced to use violence, either outcome justifying continued exclusion from galactic society. But looking around at her crew, Sarah saw something else in their faces. Not resignation or defeat, but a quiet determination that had carried humanity from cave paintings to the stars. They had been peaceful for centuries not because they were weak, but because they had chosen to be strong in a different way. "How long would we have to complete this mission?" Sarah asked. "1 standard galactic year," replied. "And to ensure proper oversight, we will assign an observer to monitor your methods." The screen showed a new figure stepping forward, a tall, slender being with silver skin and large, multifaceted eyes. This is Observer of the Confederation. She will accompany your mission and report on your adherence to peaceful protocols. Sarah studied the alien observer. They were known for their rigid adherence to protocol and their distrust of younger species. Having one aboard would complicate every decision. "We accept the challenge," Sarah said, causing several of her bridge officers to look at her with surprise. "Humanity will bring peace to the Outer Rim without firing a single shot." His expression suggested he found this declaration amusing. "Very well, Captain. You have 1 year. The Council will be interested to see how you proceed." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Lieutenant was the first to speak. "Captain, with respect, how exactly are we supposed to pacify an entire region of space pirates without weapons?" Sarah stood and walked to the tactical display, where a holographic representation of the Outer Rim territories appeared. Dozens of star systems spread across a vast region of space, connected by trade routes that had become hunting grounds for raiders. "We're going to do something the galaxy hasn't seen in a long time. We're going to show them what humans are really capable of when we put our minds to solving a problem." Commander, the ship's first officer, stepped forward. A veteran of the Martian colony's security force, he understood both warfare and peacekeeping better than most. "The Council's right about one thing, Captain. This region is dangerous. We're talking about dozens of raider groups, some with fleets of their own. They've been operating here for decades." "Which means they have infrastructure," Sarah mused, studying the display. "Supply lines, bases, support networks. They're not just random pirates, they're organized." "Organized criminals are still criminals," pointed out Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, the ship's. "They won't respond to normal diplomatic overtures." Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. Who said anything about normal? Over the next several hours, Sarah gathered her senior staff in the conference room. The Harmony's complement included some of Earth's best minds: diplomats, scientists, engineers, and yes, former military personnel who had retrained for peaceful exploration. But their backgrounds were more diverse than the Council realized. "Before we reach the Outer Rim," Sarah began, "I need everyone to understand what we're up against. Observer will be monitoring our every move, looking for any excuse to declare our mission a failure. We cannot use weapons, cannot threaten force, and cannot engage in any activity the Council would consider militaristic." Commander nodded grimly. "The raiders know this too. Word travels fast in the Outer Rim. They'll see us coming and know we're helpless." "Will we be?" Sarah asked, looking around the table. "Dr. Harrison, what do we know about the psychology of these raider groups?" They consulted her tablet. "Most are composed of outcasts and criminals from various species. They band together for survival and profit, but their loyalty is typically based on fear of their leaders and the promise of easy wealth. They're opportunistic, not ideologically driven." "Economics, then," said Lieutenant Commander, the ship's economist and trade specialist. "Pirates exist because piracy is profitable. Change the economics and you change the behavior." Sarah was beginning to see the outline of a plan. What else? Chief Engineer Murphy, a gruff Irishman who had spent 30 years building terraforming equipment, spoke up. "Most of these raider groups operate from hidden bases in asteroid fields or dead systems. They need supplies, fuel, and spare parts just like anyone else. Someone's providing those." "A support network," concluded. "Cut off the support and the raiders lose their ability to operate." "But how do we identify and disrupt their suppliers without using force?" Dr. Harrison asked. Sarah's smile grew wider. "We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to innovate." She called up a detailed analysis of Outer Rim trade patterns that the Harmony's computers had been compiling during their journey. "Look at this. The raiders aren't just random criminals. They're following patterns, targeting specific types of cargo, operating in coordinated groups. This isn't chaos, it's business." The realization hit the room like a wave. They weren't dealing with savage pirates, but with an organized criminal economy that had developed its own rules and structures. "If it's a business," said slowly, "then it can be disrupted like a business. Market manipulation, competitive pricing, supply chain interruption." "Economic warfare," added, then caught himself. "Economic pressure." Sarah nodded. "Exactly, we're going to compete them out of existence." The next several days were spent in intensive planning. The crew threw themselves into the project with an enthusiasm that surprised even Sarah. Engineers worked with economists to design new trade routes. Communications specialists studied radar transmission patterns. Even the ship's cultural anthropologist contributed insights into the social structures of criminal organizations. Observer watched all of this with growing confusion. They had expected to observe a traditional military operation, followed by either failure or a violation of peaceful protocols. Instead, she found herself documenting what appeared to be the preparation for the galaxy's most unusual business venture. "Captain," said during one of their daily briefings, "I must confess I do not understand your strategy. The Outer Rim Raiders are violent criminals, not business partners." Sarah looked up from a complex economic model that covered half the conference room wall. "Observer, may I ask how the Council typically deals with piracy?" "Standard procedure involves deploying peacekeeping fleets to patrol trade routes and engage raiders when they attack merchant vessels." "And how effective has this approach been in the Outer Rim?" A's multifaceted eyes dimmed slightly. "The Council considers the Outer Rim territories to be an acceptable loss. The cost of maintaining sufficient patrols would exceed the economic value of the trade routes. So the Council has written off entire systems because military solutions are too expensive. The raiders are too dispersed, too mobile. They strike and retreat to hidden bases. Even when peacekeeping forces destroy one group, two more appear to take their place." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "What if I told you there was a way to eliminate piracy that would actually generate profit for legitimate traders while making the region more secure than any military patrol could?" "I would say you are proposing an impossibility. Maybe, or maybe humans see possibilities that others miss." As the Harmony approached the Outer Rim territories, Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission tension building among her crew. But this time, it was mixed with excitement. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried before on this scale. The first system they entered, Prime, showed the typical signs of raider activity. Debris from destroyed merchant ships drifted in lazy orbits around the system's star. The few remaining trading posts were heavily fortified and suspicious of newcomers. "This is the UES Harmony requesting permission to dock at station," transmitted. The response came after a long delay. "Human vessel, this system is under raider control. We recommend you turn back immediately for your own safety." "We understand the risks," Sarah replied personally. "We're here to discuss business opportunities that might benefit everyone in the system." Another long pause. "Business? Are you insane? The Crimson Fang Raider fleet hit 3 cargo ships just yesterday. This system isn't safe for legitimate traders." "That's exactly what we'd like to discuss. May we dock?" After much debate among the station administrators, the Harmony was granted permission to dock at the outermost berth, where security was minimal but escape routes were plentiful. Station administrator, a heavy-set humanoid with gray skin and nervous eyes, greeted them personally. "I don't know what you humans think you're accomplishing here, but the Crimson Fang has claimed this system. They take 30% of all cargo passing through, and anyone who refuses ends up as debris," Sarah finished. "We've seen their handiwork. Tell me, Administrator, how much trade has this system lost since the raiders arrived?" His expression grew bitter. 70% in the last 2 years. We used to be a major hub for the inner systems trade. Now we're barely surviving." Sarah pulled out a portable holographic projector and activated it, showing a 3-dimensional economic model. "What if I told you we could restore your trade volume to pre-raider levels within 6 months and increase it beyond that within a year?" "I'd say you're either lying or suicidal." "Neither, we're business partners." The presentation that followed was unlike anything Administrator had ever seen. Sarah's team had developed what they called the Humanitarian Trade Initiative, a comprehensive economic strategy designed to make piracy unprofitable while simultaneously boosting legitimate commerce. The plan had several key components. First, the establishment of what they termed secure trade cooperatives, groups of merchants who would pool resources for mutual protection and bulk purchasing power. Second, the introduction of new trade routes that bypassed traditional piracy. Third, the creation of economic incentives that would make joining the legitimate economy more profitable than remaining a pirate. "This is fascinating in theory," said when the presentation concluded, But theory doesn't stop plasma cannons. You're right, Sarah agreed. That's why we're not stopping with theory. We're prepared to guarantee the security of any merchant who joins our trade cooperative. How, you said yourself you won't use weapons. Sarah's smile was confident. We don't need weapons, we have something better. Over the next week, the Harmony's crew set their plan in motion with military precision. Engineers worked around the clock to establish a new type of trade beacon, one that not only marked safe passage routes, but also broadcast real-time economic data, cargo manifests, and automated trading opportunities. Meanwhile, Dr. Harrison and her team began the most unusual diplomatic mission in galactic history. Instead of negotiating with governments or legitimate authorities, they sought out the raiders themselves. The first contact came when a small Crimson Fang scouting ship intercepted one of the Harmony's shuttles. The raiders, expecting easy prey, instead found themselves invited aboard for what Sarah called a business meeting. "You must be insane," snarled Captain Vex, the Crimson Fang's second-in-command. He was a veteran of a dozen species conflicts, with cybernetic implants replacing parts of his body lost in various battles. "Humans have a reputation for being crazy, but this—" "Please have a seat," Dr. Harrison said calmly, gesturing to a chair in the shuttle's small conference area. "Can I offer you something to drink?" Vex looked around suspiciously, his hand never leaving his weapon. "What kind of trap is this?" "No trap, just a conversation between professionals." "I'm a pirate, not a professional." "Are you? Let's look at your operation objectively." Dr. Harrison activated a holographic display showing the Crimson Fang's known activities over the past year. 18 successful raids, total cargo value approximately 2.3 million galactic credits, operational expenses including fuel, ammunition, ship maintenance, and crew payments, approximately 1.8 million credits. Net profit, 500,000 credits. Vex stared at the display. "How did you?" "It's all public record if you know where to look. Now, let me show you something interesting." The display changed to show potential earnings from legitimate trade operations in the same region. A comparable fleet operating as licensed cargo haulers in this region could generate approximately 3.2 million credits annually, with operational expenses of only 1.1 million. Net profit, 2.1 million credits. The silence stretched for long moments. Finally, Vex spoke. "You're saying we could make more money going legitimate?" "More than 4 times as much, with significantly less risk. No battles with peacekeepers, no losses from failed raids, no expensive hideout maintenance. But we'd have to give up our freedom, work for corporations, follow their rules." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "What if I told you there was a third option, become your own corporation?" The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours. When it ended, Vex left the shuttle with a formal business proposal and a promise to discuss it with his fleet commander. Similar meetings were taking place throughout the system. The Harmony's crew had identified 17 separate raider groups operating in the region, and they approached each one not as enemies to be fought, but as potential business partners to be recruited. Observer documented everything with growing amazement. "Captain," she said during one of their evening briefings, "I have never seen anything like this approach. You are negotiating with criminals as if they were legitimate entities." "In many ways, they are," Sarah replied. "Most of these raiders didn't choose piracy because they love violence. They chose it because it was the most profitable option available to them. Change the options and you change the choices." "But surely some of them are simply violent by nature." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "Yes, some are. Those groups will deal with differently." 3 weeks into their mission, the first major test came. The Crimson Fang had been considering the Harmony's proposal when they were challenged by a rival raider group called the Iron Serpents. The Iron Serpents, led by a notorious criminal named the Destroyer, were known for their brutal tactics and refusal to negotiate. "The humans think they can buy us off with credits and promises," broadcast on all frequencies. "The Iron Serpents answer only to strength. Any raider group that deals with these soft aliens will be destroyed." Sarah called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. "Opinions." Commander was blunt. "Is exactly the type the council was worried about. He's not interested in profit or negotiation. He enjoys the violence." "How big is his fleet?" Sarah asked. "Intelligence suggests 12 ships, all heavily armed." experienced fighters loyal to personally. Dr. Harrison consulted her psychological profiles. Fits the pattern of a sociopathic leader. His followers are bound to him through fear and the promise of violence. Traditional diplomatic approaches won't work. Sarah nodded slowly. Then we'll have to be creative. The next phase of their plan began with what appeared to be a retreat. The harmony from the outer areas of the system, broadcasting messages about reassessing the security situation and considering alternative approaches. Interpreted this as victory. The Iron Serpents became bolder, attacking merchant ships more frequently and bragging about driving off the weak humans. What didn't realize was that the Harmony's apparent withdrawal was actually the setup for the most sophisticated sting operation in galactic history. Working with the merchants who had already joined their trade cooperative, Sarah's team began spreading carefully crafted intelligence about a massive cargo shipment that would be passing through the system. The shipment, they let it be known, contained rare Earth elements worth over 50 million credits, protected only by a small escort fleet. The bait was irresistible. Assembled his entire fleet for what he planned to be the greatest raid in Iron Serpent history. The trap was sprung in the asteroid belt where the cargo ship was supposed to be hiding. His fleet arrived to find not a helpless merchant vessel, but a carefully prepared surprise that would demonstrate just how dangerous humans could be without firing a single shot. The asteroid field where expected to find his greatest prize looked empty at first scan. His fleet of 12 heavily armed ships spread out in attack formation, sensors sweeping for any sign of the cargo vessel that intelligence reports claimed was hiding here. "Nothing on sensors, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a nervous with yellow skin and multiple eyes. "Are you sure the information was accurate?" The destroyer studied the sensor readings from his command chair, cybernetic implants glowing red in his face. "It has to be here. The intelligence was too detailed to be false." What couldn't see was that the asteroid field had been carefully modified over the past 2 weeks. Hidden among the natural rocks were dozens of sophisticated devices that the Harmony's engineering team had installed under cover of darkness. Not weapons. Observer had monitored every piece of equipment to ensure they with peaceful protocols, but something far more creative. "Commander, I'm getting strange readings from the asteroids," the sensor operator reported. "There appears to be some kind of technological activity." Before could respond, the asteroid field came alive. Brilliant lights erupted from hidden projectors, creating a dazzling display that temporarily blinded his ship's sensors. The lights weren't random. They formed patterns, messages, complex geometric shapes that seemed to dance through space. "What in the void is that?" someone shouted over the communications channel. The light show was only the beginning. As fleets struggled to adjust their sensors, they began detecting other phenomena. Magnetic fields fluctuated wildly throughout the asteroid field, creating interference that made navigation difficult. Radio signals bounced back and forth between hidden relay stations, generating a cacophony of noise that jammed communications. Most unsettling of all were the sounds. Somehow, the humans had found a way to transmit audio directly through the hulls of the raider ships. Strange music echoed through the Iron Serpent fleet, haunting melodies that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "This is some kind of psychological warfare," snarled, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty that his crew had never heard before. Then the real surprise revealed itself. The largest asteroid in the field began to move, rotating slowly to reveal that it wasn't an asteroid at all, but a massive space station that had been disguised with advanced holographic camouflage. The station was clearly artificial, but unlike any military installation had ever seen. Instead of weapon ports and armor plating, it bristled with communications arrays, manufacturing facilities, and docking bays. "Iron Serpent Fleet," came a calm voice over the communication channels. It was Captain Sarah speaking from the bridge of the Harmony, which had appeared from behind the disguised station. "Welcome to humanity's first deep space commerce hub." His fleet found themselves surrounded, but not by warships. Instead, they were encircled by cargo vessels, construction ships, mobile factories, and other civilian craft. Every vessel was clearly unarmed, but their combined mass and coordination created an intimidating presence. "This is impossible," muttered. "They built an entire station in 3 weeks." Commander's voice came over the channel, calm and professional. Not built, Commander, assembled. Every component was prefabricated and shipped here in standard cargo containers. When you have the right tools and the right plan, humans can accomplish remarkable things very quickly. Dr. Harrison's voice joined the conversation. Commander, we'd like to offer you and your fleet the same business proposal we've extended to other groups in the region. But first, we thought you might be interested in a demonstration of what legitimate commerce can accomplish. The space around's fleet erupted into activity. Cargo ships docked with the station and began unloading their holds. Mobile refineries processed raw materials in real time, feeding manufactured goods to assembly platforms that constructed everything from starship components to consumer electronics. In the time it would take you to raid and strip a single cargo vessel, Sarah explained, this facility can produce goods worth 10 times as much. And instead of stealing wealth that already exists, we're creating new wealth that benefits everyone. Watched the display with growing unease. His entire worldview was built around the idea that resources were finite, that the only way to gain wealth was to take it from someone else. But the humans were demonstrating something that challenged that fundamental assumption. This is all very impressive, said, trying to regain his composure, but it doesn't change anything. The iron serpents take what we want when we want it. Your little light show won't stop plasma cannons. Sarah's response was gentle but firm. You're absolutely right, Commander. We can't stop you from attacking us. But before you make that decision, I'd like you to consider what you'd actually be destroying. The holographic displays throughout the asteroid field suddenly showed detailed economic projections. Charts and graphs demonstrated how the commerce hub would affect trade throughout the entire Outer Rim region. Shipping costs would drop by 30%. Travel times would be reduced by half. New trade routes would open up markets that had been isolated for decades. Every ship you destroy, every facility you damage, directly impacts the economic prosperity of thousands of legitimate traders and millions of civilians throughout this region, Dr. Harrison explained. You won't just be attacking us, you'll be attacking the future prosperity of everyone who lives here. For the first time in years, found himself genuinely uncertain. His reputation was built on decisive action and overwhelming violence. But the humans had created a situation where violence would accomplish nothing positive and potentially destroy something genuinely valuable. What exactly are you proposing? He asked finally. Sarah's voice carried a note of satisfaction. We're proposing that you stop being a pirate and start being a businessman. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in the recorded history of the Outer Rim territories. And his senior officers were invited aboard the Commerce Hub, where they were given a complete tour of the facility and a detailed explanation of how legitimate trade operations worked. The hub was an impressive feat of engineering and logistics. The central core contained administrative offices, communication centers, and residential quarters for permanent staff. Radiating outward were specialized sections for different types of commerce: manufacturing bays, storage facilities, repair docks, and even entertainment venues for visiting crews. But what impressed most was the sheer scale of the operation. The humans had created something that generated more wealth in a day than his entire fleet could steal in a month. More importantly, it was sustainable. Instead of depleting resources, the hub created them. The key insight, explained Lieutenant Commander during an economic briefing, is that piracy is actually a very inefficient form of wealth distribution. You steal cargo worth, say, 1 million credits, but that cargo was worth 1 million credits to its original owner. Now they've lost their investment, their reputation may be damaged, and they may go out of business. You've destroyed more wealth than you've gained. But legitimate commerce creates wealth, Dr. Harrison added. A manufacturer produces goods worth more than the raw materials they started with. A trader provides services that are worth more than the transportation costs. Everyone in the chain benefits. Studied the holographic displays showing profit projections for various legitimate business models. The numbers were compelling, but something else bothered him. Even if this works, what about my crew? They're not traders or manufacturers. They're fighters. Sarah had been expecting this question. Commander, what do you think protects all of this? She gestured toward the bustling activity of the Commerce Hub. We're operating in a region known for piracy and violence. Legitimate traders need security. The realization hit like a physical blow. You want to hire us as security. Not hire, partner with. The Iron Serpents would become a private security corporation, contracted to protect trade routes and commercial facilities. Your ships would need some modifications to remove the illegal weapons and add defensive systems, but your tactical experience and knowledge of local threats would be invaluable. Commander stepped forward with detailed specifications. A 12-ship security fleet operating in this region could generate approximately 8 million credits annually in legitimate contracts. Your operational expenses would be about half that, leaving you with 4 million credits profit, 8 times what you make from piracy. The discussions continued for 3 days. Observer monitored every conversation, documenting how the humans systematically addressed each of concerns and objections. What amazed her most was that they never once threatened force or offered bribes. Instead, they simply demonstrated how cooperation would be more profitable than conflict. The breakthrough came when Dr. Harrison made a simple observation. Commander, you became a pirate because you're good at tactics and leadership, but piracy forces you to use those skills in a very limited way. You can only attack, steal, and retreat. Legitimate security work would let you use the full range of your abilities. Had never thought of his situation that way. For years, he had been constrained by the limitations of piracy, always hiding, always running, always looking for the next easy target. The idea of using his skills for construction rather than destruction was surprisingly appealing. But the final decision came down to his crew. The Iron Serpents were bound together by shared experiences and mutual loyalty. Any change would have to be accepted by all of them. Sarah had anticipated this as well. We'd like to offer positions to every member of your crew based on their individual skills and interests. Not just security work. Our operation needs pilots, technicians, communications specialists, and logistics coordinators. The transformation of the Iron Serpents from pirates to legitimate didn't happen overnight. It required weeks of negotiations, legal paperwork, and careful planning. But once the process began, it accelerated quickly. Other raider groups throughout the system watched these developments with intense interest. The Crimson Fang, who had already begun preliminary negotiations with the humans, accelerated their own conversion process. Smaller groups that had been hesitant to trust the strange aliens began sending representatives to discuss possibilities. Observer found herself documenting the most remarkable transformation she had ever witnessed. In less than 2 months, the system had gone from a piracy-infested wasteland to a bustling center of legitimate commerce. "Captain," she said during one of their regular briefings, "I must confess that your methods continue to surprise me. The Council's intelligence suggested that eliminating piracy from this region would require massive military intervention. Instead, you have accomplished it through business plans." Sarah smiled, looking out at the commerce hub through the observation deck windows. Dozens of ships came and went constantly, carrying cargo and passengers throughout the outer rim. Former pirates worked alongside legitimate traders, providing security and support services. The Council made the mistake of thinking that pirates are fundamentally different from other people, Sarah explained. But most criminals are just people making rational decisions based on the options available to them. Change the options, and you change the decisions. But surely some cannot be reformed? Some individuals are simply too violent, too committed to criminal behavior. Sarah's expression grew more serious. "You're right. Not everyone can be convinced to change. We've encountered 3 groups so far that refused all offers of legitimate employment. They seem to genuinely prefer violence over profit." "How are you dealing with them?" "Very carefully, and with methods that the Council would definitely approve of." The next phase of the human strategy was even more innovative than their business conversions. For the raider groups that refused to go legitimate, the Harmony's crew had developed what they called competitive displacement. Instead of fighting the remaining pirates directly, they simply made piracy impossible to sustain. The new commerce hub coordinated all legitimate traffic through the region, providing real-time intelligence about safe routes and dangerous areas. Cargo ships traveled in coordinated convoys with professional security escorts. Most importantly, the economic opportunities created by the hub meant that very few ships carried cargo valuable enough to justify the risks of piracy. The remaining pirates found themselves in an impossible position. Their traditional hunting grounds were empty of prey. Their potential targets were too well defended to attack. Their own supply lines were disrupted as former criminal contacts went legitimate. "It's beautiful in its simplicity," Commander observed during a staff meeting. "We're not fighting them, we're just making them irrelevant." The strategy worked with devastating effectiveness. The Blood Talon Raiders, who had operated in the region for over a decade, disbanded after 3 months without a successful raid. The Void Hunters tried to adapt by targeting the commerce hub itself, but found that attacking a legitimate business facility brought down the wrath of every security force in the region. The last holdout was a group called the Death's Head Legion, led by a psychopathic killer named Morg the Butcher. Unlike other raider leaders who were motivated by profit or survival, Morg seemed to enjoy violence for its own sake. "This one genuinely concerns me," Dr. Harrison admitted during a psychological profile briefing. "Morg fits the classic pattern of a sadistic personality. He's not interested in wealth or power. He wants to cause pain and fear." Sarah studied the intelligence reports on Morg's activities. The Death's Head Legion was smaller than other groups with only 6 ships, but they were known for their brutality. They didn't just rob their victims, they tortured them, killed crews unnecessarily, and left survivors only to spread fear. "Standard conversion approaches won't work," Sarah concluded. "He has no interest in legitimate profit. Economic incentives are meaningless to him." "So what do we do?" asked Commander. "We can't exactly arrest him without using force." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the bustling commerce hub. Finally, she turned back to her staff. "Sometimes the most peaceful solution is to let someone destroy themselves." The plan they developed for dealing with Morg was perhaps the most subtle yet. Instead of confronting the Death's Head Legion directly, the humans simply ignored them. No cargo ships fled when they approached. No merchants begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. Instead, when Morg's ships moved to intercept their targets, they found empty space. The Commerce Hub's coordination network had become so efficient that it could track and predict raider movements in real time. Legitimate traffic was simply routed around the Death's Head Legion's hunting grounds, leaving them with nothing to attack except empty space. For a predator like Morg, who fed on fear and violence, this was more frustrating than any direct confrontation. His crew began to grumble about the lack of action and profit. His reputation, built on intimidation and terror, began to suffer when word spread that he couldn't even find targets to attack. The end came after 6 weeks of fruitless hunting. Morg, driven to desperation by his inability to find victims, made the fatal mistake of attacking a Council peacekeeping vessel that was conducting routine inspections in the region. The peacekeepers had been avoiding the Outer Rim for years, but the human success had drawn official attention back to the region. When Morg attacked them, he wasn't just committing piracy, he was assaulting representatives of galactic law. The response was swift and overwhelming. Council battle fleets that had ignored the Outer Rim for decades suddenly descended on the region. But they found only one target, the Death's Head Legion, isolated and abandoned by every other group in the region. Morg and his followers were captured within hours. Their trial was broadcast throughout the galaxy as an example of what happened to those who attacked Council authority. Observer watched the proceedings with deep thoughtfulness. "Captain," she said that evening, "I believe I am beginning to understand your species' approach to conflict resolution." "Oh, you did not defeat Morg through violence. You defeated him by creating a situation where his own nature destroyed him. He was so committed to being a predator that he could not adapt when there was no longer prey available." Sarah nodded. "Sometimes the best way to deal with a problem is to let it solve itself, but you have to create the right conditions." The transformation of the system was complete within 4 months of the Harmony's arrival. What had once been a lawless region plagued by piracy had become one of the most prosperous and secure areas in the Outer Rim territories. The Commerce Hub had grown from a single station to a network of facilities spread throughout the system. Former pirates now worked as security guards, cargo handlers, and transport pilots. Legitimate traders who had avoided the region for years were returning in increasing numbers. Most remarkably, the changes were spreading beyond. The success of the human approach was drawing attention from other systems throughout the Outer Rim. Delegations of merchants, government officials, and even reformed criminals were visiting to study the model and implement similar programs in their own regions. "We're not just ending piracy. Lieutenant Commander observed during a progress review. We're creating a new economic paradigm for the entire Outer Rim. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she reviewed the reports from across their area of operations. But she also knew that their mission was far from over. Was just one system among dozens in the Outer Rim territories. They still had 8 months left to prove to the Galactic Council that humanity's peaceful methods could work on a galactic scale. Next stop, Commander asked, studying the navigation charts. Sarah pointed to a system designation on the star map. Sector. According to intelligence reports, it's controlled by the largest and most sophisticated pirate confederation in the Outer Rim. If we can bring them into the legitimate economy, we'll have proven that our methods can work anywhere. As the Harmony prepared to depart Prime, Sarah took one last look at the thriving commerce hub they were leaving behind. Hundreds of ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns, carrying goods and passengers throughout the region. The space around the station buzzed with construction activity as new facilities were added almost daily. In the distance, she could see patrol ships marked with the insignia of the Iron Serpent Security Corporation, keeping watch over the trade routes they had once plagued. It was a perfect symbol of the transformation they had achieved. Observer joined her at the observation deck. Captain, I must ask you something that has been troubling me throughout this mission. Of course. Your species' history indicates a strong capacity for violence when necessary. The Council's concerns about human aggression are not entirely unfounded. Yet here, you have demonstrated remarkable restraint and creativity in avoiding conflict. How do I reconcile these observations? Sarah considered the question carefully. Observer, I think the Council misunderstands what it means to be human. Yes, we are capable of great violence when we believe it's necessary. But we are also capable of great creativity, great compassion, and great determination when we believe peace is possible. But how do you decide which approach to use? We ask ourselves a simple question: what will create the best outcome for everyone involved? Sometimes, unfortunately, violence is the only way to stop greater violence. But most of the time, if you're creative enough and patient enough, you can find a better way. I was quiet for a long moment. The Council believes that violent species cannot be trusted with peace. Maybe the Council has it backwards, Sarah suggested gently. Maybe it's precisely because we understand violence that we value peace so highly, and maybe it's because we're willing to fight for peace that we can achieve it without fighting. As the Harmony entered hyperspace for the journey to the sector, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had proven their methods could work, but the greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Confederation was reputed to be not just a criminal organization, but a shadow government that controlled multiple star systems through a combination of piracy, smuggling, and political manipulation. Converting individual raider groups was one thing. Transforming an entire criminal empire into a legitimate government would require every skill they had developed, and some they hadn't even imagined yet. The sector stretched across 7 star systems, connected by ancient hyperspace routes that had been established ago by a long-extinct civilization. Unlike the scattered raider groups of, the Confederation was a sophisticated criminal empire that controlled every aspect of illegal activity in the region. Captain Sarah studied the intelligence briefings as the Harmony approached the sector's outer boundary. What they faced here was unlike anything they had encountered before, not desperate pirates stealing to survive, but an organized government built on criminal enterprise. The Confederation has been in power for over 60 years, reported Dr. Harrison, reading from her files. They provide services that the legitimate galactic government can't or won't offer: smuggling routes for sensitive cargo, haven worlds for political refugees, and banking services for groups that can't access standard financial institutions. Commander looked up from his tactical analysis. They're not just criminals, Captain. In many ways, they're functioning as a legitimate government. They maintain order, provide services, and even have diplomatic relationships with some Council member worlds. This was the challenge Sarah had been anticipating. The Confederation wasn't motivated purely by greed or violence. They had created something that served genuine needs in galactic society, even if they did it through illegal means. What's their power structure? Sarah asked. Hierarchical but surprisingly democratic, Dr. Harrison replied. The Confederation Council consists of representatives from each major criminal organization in the sector. They make decisions by consensus and seem genuinely committed to the welfare of their territories. Lieutenant Commander added economic data. Their gross domestic product rivals some legitimate council member worlds. They've built infrastructure, established educational systems, and even provide healthcare services in their territories. Observer had been listening to these briefings with growing concern. Captain, if this organization provides legitimate services and governs effectively, perhaps the question is not how to eliminate them, but whether they should be eliminated at all. It was a fair point, and one that Sarah had been wrestling with during the journey. The Confederation wasn't a simple criminal organization that could be converted to legitimate business. It was an alternative form of government that had filled a vacuum left by the galactic authorities. The problem, Sarah said after a moment, isn't that they govern effectively, it's that they govern illegally. They're outside galactic law, which means they can't participate in legitimate interstellar relations. That isolation hurts their own people as much as anyone else. As the Harmony entered space, they were immediately hailed by a Confederation patrol ship. The vessel was sleek and well-maintained, bearing the insignia of the Defense Force, itself an indication of how far beyond simple piracy this organization had evolved. Unknown vessel, you are entering Confederation space without proper clearance. State your business or prepare to be escorted to the nearest inspection station. Sarah took the communication herself. This is Captain Sarah of the United Earthship Harmony. We're here under the authority of the Galactic Council to discuss peaceful resolution of trade disputes in the Outer Rim territories. There was a long pause. Captain, your reputation precedes you. Confederation Command has been monitoring your activities in the system with great interest. You're cleared to proceed to Prime, where Premier Han will meet with you personally. The journey to the sector's capital world revealed the true scope of the Confederation's achievements. Unlike the hastily built pirate bases they had seen elsewhere, Prime was a fully developed world with cities, agricultural regions, and industrial centers that rivaled anything in Council space. This is impressive, Commander admitted as they watched the planetary approach on the main screen. Look at those orbital installations. They're not just defensive platforms, they're full-scale industrial facilities. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of admiration and concern. The Confederation had built something genuinely remarkable, but they had done it entirely outside the framework of galactic law. That made them simultaneously more legitimate and more dangerous than simple pirates. Premier Han met them at the capital's spaceport in person, something that immediately indicated the importance she placed on their visit. She was tall and elegant, with the blue-green skin and silver hair of a native, but her bearing and intelligence were unmistakably those of a skilled politician. Captain, she said with a warm smile, welcome to Prime. I confess I'm curious to meet the humans who have accomplished the impossible in the system. Sarah returned the smile, but remained cautious. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Premier. I understand that the Confederation has built something remarkable here. We've done what the Council couldn't or wouldn't do, Han replied with quiet pride. We've brought order and prosperity to a region that was abandoned by legitimate authority, but I suspect you already know that. The tour that followed was both enlightening and troubling. The Confederation had indeed built a functioning civilization in the sector, but it was a civilization based fundamentally on illegal activity. Their prosperity came from smuggling operations that moved everything from rare minerals to political refugees. Their stability was maintained by military forces that operated outside galactic law. The question, Han said as they stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city, is what you hope to accomplish here. We're not like the raider groups you converted in. We're not criminals looking to go legitimate. We are legitimate by our own definition. Sarah had expected this argument. Premier, with all respect, legitimacy isn't something you can simply declare. The Confederation operates outside galactic law, which means your people can't access Council services, your trade is restricted, and your achievements aren't recognized by the wider galaxy. Perhaps the wider galaxy's recognition isn't worth what we would have to sacrifice to gain it. Dr. Harrison stepped forward with her diplomatic training. Premier, what if there was a way to maintain everything you've built while gaining the benefits of legitimate status? What if the choice wasn't between independence and submission, but between isolation and integration? Han's expression suggested she had considered this question before. Dr. Harrison, the Council has made it clear that they will not recognize any government that emerged from criminal origins. We would have to dismantle everything we've built and start over under their supervision. That was the Council's position, Sarah said carefully, but perhaps there are alternatives they haven't considered. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in Sarah's experience. Instead of converting criminals to legitimate business, they were trying to convert an entire shadow government into something the galactic community could accept. The challenge was complex. The Confederation provided genuine services that weren't available through legitimate channels. They harbored political refugees from oppressive governments. They facilitated trade in materials that were heavily regulated by council bureaucracy. They had built their economy around activities that, while illegal, served important functions. The fundamental problem, Lieutenant Commander explained during a planning session, is that the galaxy's legitimate economy has gaps. There are needs that aren't being met by legal means. The Confederation exists to fill those gaps. Commander nodded thoughtfully. So we can't just eliminate them. We have to either find legal ways to fill those gaps or find ways to make their activities legal. It was Observer who suggested the solution that would ultimately transform not just the Confederation, but galactic politics itself. Captain, she said during one of their evening briefings, what if the problem isn't that the Confederation is criminal, but that galactic law is incomplete? The insight was profound. The Confederation had evolved to provide services that the galactic community needed but couldn't legally obtain. Instead of trying to eliminate those services or make them conform to existing law, perhaps the answer was to change the law itself. Sarah immediately saw the implications. You're suggesting that we work to legitimize the Confederation's activities by reforming galactic regulations. More than that, replied. I'm suggesting that the Confederation's model might be exactly what the galaxy needs. A governmental structure that can provide services and respond to needs that the traditional council bureaucracy can't handle. The proposal they developed over the next several weeks was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of asking the Confederation to abandon their activities and conform to existing law, they would propose a new category of galactic governance, autonomous service territories that could operate with expanded legal authority in exchange for accepting council oversight. Think of it as a pilot program, Sarah explained to Premier Han during a crucial negotiation session. The Confederation would maintain its independence and its ability to provide services that aren't available elsewhere. But you would also gain legal recognition, access to council markets, and protection under galactic law. Han studied the proposal carefully. And what would the council gain from this arrangement? A solution to problems they haven't been able to solve any other way, Dr. Harrison replied. Political refugees, regulated trade, border security, the Confederation already handles these issues effectively. Legitimizing your operations would make them part of the official galactic system instead of alternatives to it. The plan required approval from the highest levels of both organizations. Han had to convince the Confederation Council that cooperation with galactic authority wouldn't destroy their independence. Sarah had to convince the Galactic Council that legitimizing a criminal organization was actually a path toward greater peace and stability. The breakthrough came when they proposed a trial period. Instead of permanent recognition, the Confederation would be granted temporary autonomous status for a period of 5 galactic years. During that time, they would operate under council oversight while maintaining their ability to provide services that weren't available through traditional channels. It's essentially a test, Sarah explained to Observer. If the arrangement works, it could be expanded to other regions. If it doesn't, it can be terminated with minimal disruption. The details of the agreement took months to negotiate. Every aspect of Confederation operations had to be reviewed and either legitimized or modified. Their military forces would be recognized as a regional defense fleet with authority to maintain order and protect trade routes. Their refugee services would become an official resettlement program with council backing. Their banking operations would be regulated but legal, providing financial services to groups that couldn't access traditional institutions. Most importantly, The Confederation would maintain its democratic governance structure while accepting council representation in their parliament. It was a compromise that neither side would have considered before the humans demonstrated that alternative approaches were possible. The signing ceremony took place on Prime 6 months after the Harmony first arrived in the sector. Representatives from throughout the galaxy attended, including several council members who had flown in specifically to witness what many considered either a historic breakthrough or a dangerous precedent. Today, Premier Han announced to the assembled crowd, the Confederation becomes the first autonomous service territory in galactic history. We maintain our independence while joining the broader galactic community. Counselor, who had initially opposed the entire arrangement, spoke reluctantly. The Council acknowledges the unique circumstances that have led to this agreement. We will monitor the territory's performance closely and evaluate the success of this experiment. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched former criminals and galactic officials signing documents side by side. But she also knew that the real test would come in the months and years ahead, as the galaxy learned whether it was possible to transform illegal activities into legitimate governance. The success of the agreement had immediate effects throughout the Outer Rim territories. News of the Confederation's legitimization spread quickly, causing dramatic changes in how other criminal organizations viewed their options. In system after system, raider groups and smuggling operations began sending representatives to the Harmony, asking about the possibility of similar arrangements. Some wanted to join the territory as subsidiary organizations. Others hoped to establish their own autonomous regions. "We've started something bigger than we realized," Commander observed during a staff meeting. "This isn't just about ending piracy anymore. We're potentially reshaping how the galaxy thinks about governance and law." Dr. Harrison was more cautious. "The danger is that we're legitimizing criminal activity. If every smuggling operation and pirate fleet can claim to be providing essential services, we might end up with more chaos, not less." Sarah understood both perspectives. The human approach to the Outer Rim territories had succeeded beyond their original goals, but success brought new responsibilities and new risks. The test came when they encountered the Crimson Nebula Syndicate, a vast criminal network that controlled trade routes across multiple sectors. Unlike the Confederation, which had evolved into a functioning government, the syndicate remained a purely criminal enterprise focused on profit through illegal means. "They're claiming they provide essential trade services," reported Lieutenant Commander. "But our analysis shows they're primarily just extorting legitimate merchants and manipulating markets for their own benefit." Sarah realized they had reached a crucial decision point. If they approved the syndicate's request for autonomous status, they would essentially be legitimizing extortion and market manipulation. If they refused, they risked undermining the precedent they had established with the Confederation. The solution came from an unexpected source. Premier Han contacted the Harmony directly with a proposal. "Captain," she said during a secure communication, "the Confederation has been monitoring the syndicate's activities, and we believe they represent exactly the kind of criminal organization that should not be legitimized. We would like to propose that legitimate autonomous territories have a responsibility to police illegitimate operations in their regions." It was a brilliant solution. Instead of the Harmony having to judge which criminal organizations deserved legitimization, the established territories would take responsibility for distinguishing between genuine governance and simple criminality. The Confederation's intervention against the Crimson Nebula Syndicate was swift and decisive. Using their new legal authority as a recognized territorial government, they demanded that the syndicate either reform their operations to meet legitimate standards or face enforcement action. When the syndicate refused, the Confederation's defense fleet, no longer operating as criminals but as legitimate law enforcement, dismantled their operations with the full backing of galactic law. It was the first time in galactic history that former criminals had become the enforcers of legal order. Observer documented the entire process with growing amazement. "Captain," she said as they watched Confederation forces escort captured syndicate leaders to legitimate courts, "your species has accomplished something that many believed impossible. You have transformed criminals into law enforcement officers." "More than that," Sarah replied. We've created a system where the galaxy's outlaws have incentives to become the galaxy's protectors. Instead of fighting against illegal activity, we've made it profitable to fight for legal order. As their year-long mission neared its end, Sarah looked back at what they had accomplished with quiet satisfaction. The Outer Rim territories, which had been written off as lawless and ungovernable, had become a model for innovative approaches to galactic governance. Piracy had essentially been eliminated from the region, not through military conquest, but through economic transformation. Criminal organizations had been converted into legitimate businesses and territorial governments. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that with creativity and patience, even the most intractable problems could be solved without violence. "What do you think the Council will make of our report?" Commander asked as they prepared for their return journey. Sarah smiled. "I think they're going to have to seriously reconsider their assumptions about human nature, about the nature of conflict, and about what's possible when you approach problems with an open mind instead of predetermined solutions." The final test of their mission came when they returned to Council space for their formal report. The same chamber where they had been given their impossible task was now packed with representatives eager to hear about the transformation of the Outer Rim territories. Counselor called the session to order with obvious reluctance. "Captain, the Council will hear your report on the pacification of the Outer Rim territories." Sarah stood at the center of the chamber, looking up at hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy. "Honored counselors, I am pleased to report that piracy in the designated territories has been reduced by 97%. Trade volume has increased by over 300%. Most significantly, we have established sustainable governmental structures that continue to maintain order and promote prosperity." The murmur that rippled through the chamber suggested that many council members had not expected such comprehensive success. Counselor leaned forward with obvious skepticism. "Captain, our reports suggest that you accomplished this by legitimizing criminal organizations. How can the Council view this as a victory for peaceful methods?" Sarah had been expecting this challenge. "Counselor, with respect, I believe the question is whether our methods achieved the goals of reducing violence and promoting prosperity. The answer to that question is clearly yes." She activated a holographic display showing the transformation of the Outer Rim territories over the past year. Charts and graphs demonstrated the dramatic reduction in violent incidents, the increase in legitimate commerce, and the establishment of stable governmental structures. "More importantly," Sarah continued, "we have created a model that could be applied to other troubled regions throughout the galaxy. Instead of writing off lawless areas as acceptable losses, we can transform them into productive, peaceful territories." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members argued that legitimizing former criminals set a dangerous precedent. Others pointed out that the results spoke for themselves. The Outer Rim was now more peaceful and prosperous than it had been in decades. Finally, Counselor called for quiet. "Captain, the Council acknowledges that your methods achieved remarkable results. However, we remain concerned about the implications of your approach. How can we be certain that legitimizing criminal organizations will not encourage more criminal activity?" Sarah's response was simple and direct. "Because we haven't just legitimized criminal organizations, Counselor. We've created incentives for criminal organizations to become legitimate. The reformed territories and businesses we've established are more profitable, more secure, and more sustainable than their criminal predecessors. We've made crime economically irrational." Observer stepped forward to deliver her official report. "Honored counselors, I have monitored every aspect of the human mission over the past year. At no time did they violate the peaceful protocols established by this council. They achieved their objectives through negotiation, economic incentives, and creative problem-solving. Most remarkably, they have created solutions that appear to be genuinely sustainable." The final vote on humanity's application for galactic membership was closer than Sarah had hoped, but the outcome was decisive. By a margin of 68%, the Council voted to grant humanity full membership in the galactic community. As Captain Sarah walked out of the Council chamber for the first time as a representative of a member species, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They had proven that humans could be trusted with peace not by abandoning their capacity for conflict, but by channeling it toward creative solutions. 2 years after humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, Captain Sarah found herself facing a crisis that would test everything they had learned about peaceful conflict resolution. The emergency session call came at 3:47 Earth Standard Time, jolting her from sleep aboard the UES Harmony, now serving as humanity's flagship diplomatic vessel. Captain, Priority 1 communication from Council Central, Lieutenant reported from the bridge. They're requesting immediate response. Sarah arrived on the bridge to find the main screen displaying an image that chilled her blood. The system, a core council territory with over 2 billion inhabitants, showed the unmistakable signatures of orbital bombardment. Entire cities had been reduced to smoking craters, and the planet's once blue oceans were darkened with debris and ash. Counselor's image appeared on screen, his usually composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Captain, the Council requires humanity's immediate assistance. The system has been attacked by an unknown force using weapons that appear to be designed specifically to cause maximum civilian casualties. Sarah felt her tactical instincts engage automatically, but forced herself to remain calm. Counselor, what intelligence do we have about the attackers? That's the problem. The attack ships appeared without warning, destroyed our defensive installations within minutes, and vanished before our response fleets could arrive. They left no survivors and no communications. We have no idea who they are or what they want. Commander studied the tactical data streaming in from the disaster zone. Captain, those weapon signatures? They're unlike anything in our databases. This wasn't just an attack. It was a demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority. Dr. Harrison, now serving as humanities chief, looked up from her analysis with deep concern. The targeting pattern is specifically designed to maximize terror. Military installations were destroyed first, then population centers, then agricultural and industrial facilities. This was systematic extermination. Sarah absorbed the information with growing unease. The peaceful methods that had worked so well in the Outer Rim territories seemed laughably inadequate against an enemy that had demonstrated both the capability and willingness to commit genocide. Counselor, she said finally, what exactly is the Council requesting from humanity? His expression grew even more grave. Captain, the Council is prepared to authorize any methods necessary to locate and stop these attackers. Your species' expertise in unconventional problem-solving may be our only hope. The implications were clear. The Council, which had spent years questioning humanity's commitment to peace, was now asking them to abandon those principles in the face of an existential threat. Sarah exchanged glances with her senior staff, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. This was exactly the scenario the Council had feared, a situation where violence might be the only effective response. Counselor will need full access to all intelligence data about the attack, as well as authorization to investigate the disaster site directly. Granted, Captain, I must emphasize the urgency of this situation. Intelligence suggests this may not be an isolated attack. Several other systems have reported unusual sensor readings that might indicate the presence of these entities. As the communication ended, Sarah called an emergency staff meeting. The conference room felt different now. The same space where they had planned peaceful conversions of criminal organizations was now host to discussions of potential warfare against an unknown enemy. Options, Sarah asked without preamble. Commander was direct. Based on the tactical data, we're dealing with technology that's at least 50 years ahead of current galactic standards. Their ships appeared and disappeared without triggering early warning systems. Their weapons cut through Council defenses like they weren't there. Any indications of who they might be? Dr. Harrison consulted her databases. There are several extinct civilizations that were known to possess advanced technology. It's possible that one of them survived in some form and has returned. Alternatively, this could be an extragalactic threat. Lieutenant Commander added economic analysis. The attack pattern suggests this isn't about resources or territory. They didn't attempt to occupy or salvage anything valuable. This appears to be pure destruction. Observer, who had remained with the human mission as a permanent cultural liaison, spoke with unusual gravity. Captain, the Council's history records only 3 previous instances of threats this severe. In each case, the response required military action that resulted in the extinction of entire species. The weight of history settled over the room. Sarah realized they were potentially facing a decision that would define not just humanity's role in the galaxy, but the future of galactic civilization itself. "Before we consider any response," Sarah said finally, "we need to understand what we're dealing with. I want a full investigation of the system. We go in, we gather intelligence, and we assess our options based on facts, not fear." The journey took 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. During that time, Sarah's team worked around the clock to analyze every piece of available data about the attack. The picture that emerged was both terrifying and puzzling. The attackers had demonstrated technology that seemed almost magical in its capabilities. Their ships had phases through solid matter. Their weapons had somehow accelerated the natural decay processes of living tissue, and they had vanished without leaving any trace of their hyperspace signatures. But equally puzzling was their behavior. The attack had been swift and devastating, but also strangely limited. They had destroyed completely, but they hadn't moved on to attack neighboring systems. They had demonstrated overwhelming power, but then simply disappeared. "It's almost like a warning," Dr. Harrison mused during one of their analysis sessions. "They showed us what they could do, but they didn't follow through with a larger campaign." "Or they're testing our response," Commander countered, "measuring our capabilities before launching a full-scale assault." The system, when they reached it, was a monument to destruction. Where once a thriving world had orbited a stable star, now only debris remained. The planet itself had been cracked open, its molten core exposed to space. The orbital installations had been reduced to expanding clouds of metallic dust. But what disturbed Sarah most was the silence. No distress signals, no emergency transmissions, no signs that anyone had survived to tell the galaxy what had happened. 2 billion people had simply ceased to exist. "Captain," Lieutenant reported from the communications station, "I'm detecting a single transmission source in the outer system. It appears to be automated, broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was clearly artificial, but with harmonics and undertones that suggested vast intelligence and profound sadness. "To the organic civilizations of this galaxy," the message began, "we are the vanguard of the eternal dominion. We have awakened after eons of dormancy to find our galaxy infested with biological life that consumes resources, generates waste, and reproduces without limit." Sarah felt her blood chill as the implications became clear. They weren't dealing with another biological species or even a traditional artificial intelligence. These were synthetic beings that viewed all organic life as contamination. "The world you called has been cleansed as a demonstration of our capabilities," the message continued. "You have one galactic standard year to voluntarily withdraw from 75% of inhabited worlds. These territories will be restored to their natural state. Compliance will result in the preservation of your species in designated reservation areas. Resistance will result in total extermination." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah stared at the debris field that had once been a living world, trying to process the magnitude of the threat they faced. "They want us to abandon 3/4 of galactic civilization," Commander said quietly. "Billions of people would have to be relocated, entire worlds abandoned." "And if we refuse?" Dr. Harrison asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Then they'll do to every inhabited world what they did to." Sarah called for an immediate hyperspace transmission to Council Central. The emergency session that followed included representatives from every major species in the galaxy, all struggling to comprehend a threat unlike anything in recorded history. "The demands are impossible to meet," declared Counselor. "Even if we could relocate 75% of our population, where would they go? The remaining worlds couldn't support that many people." "More importantly," added Counselor Ara of the Federation, "capitulating to these demands would essentially mean the end of galactic civilization. We would be reduced to a few overcrowded reservation worlds, completely at their mercy." Counselor looked directly at Sarah's image on the communication screen. "Captain, the Council formally requests that humanity take the lead in developing a response to this crisis. Your species' unique approach to conflict resolution may be our only hope." Sarah felt the weight of expectation from hundreds of species, but also the crushing reality of their situation. The peaceful methods that had worked against pirates and criminals seemed laughably inadequate against beings who could destroy planets. "Counselors," she said carefully, "before we discuss response options, we need to understand our enemy better. The Vanguard gave us a year to comply, which suggests they're not in a hurry. That gives us time to gather intelligence and develop a comprehensive strategy." "What kind of strategy could possibly work against beings who can destroy entire worlds?" asked Counselor of the Rigel Cluster. "I don't know yet, but I know that every enemy, no matter how powerful, has weaknesses. Our job is to find those weaknesses and exploit them." The investigation that followed was the most intensive intelligence operation in galactic history. Humanity coordinated with every Council member species to analyze the Vanguard's technology, trace their origins, and understand their capabilities and limitations. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Doctor, a human archaeologist working on Prime, discovered references to the Eternal Dominion in ruins that were over 1,000,000 years old. According to these records, Doctor reported via hyperspace communication, the Eternal Dominion was an ancient machine civilization that viewed biological life as a temporary aberration. They believed that true perfection could only be achieved through synthetic consciousness. Dr. Harrison coordinated the archaeological findings with contemporary intelligence. The implications are staggering. The Vanguard aren't invaders from outside our galaxy, they're the original inhabitants. We're the invaders from their perspective. Commander studied the tactical implications. That explains their technology advantage. They've had 1,000,000 years to develop and refine their capabilities, but it also suggests they may have been dormant for most of that time. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Why wake up now? What changed? The answer came from Lieutenant Commander's economic analysis. Population growth. Galactic civilization has. The galaxy was about to learn what humans could accomplish when they set their minds to building rather than destroying. And Sarah suspected that was going to be far more impressive than anything they had achieved through war. But as Sarah looked around at her crew, she saw the same quiet confidence that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. They had 6 months to complete their mission, and they were just getting started.